huge national dialogue is needed. Kenya has never been under such stress. For the past in fact more than 5 years, the past decade, they've been under consistent bombardment. And the biggest issue now in Kenya is social cohesion. How do you get all these fragmented groups, being the group from Raila Odinga, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and then all the supporters, and then there's another fringe of NGOs and civil society groups and the churches, and then including Al-Shabaab and all the other groups that are creating so much friction. And so that national dialogue, it's so needed. It's very, very imperative.
Well, two things. Is the national dialogue likely to happen, and what must authorities do to create the right climate for those types of discussions?
It should happen, but it won't happen very quickly because power plays out. What you want is you want the people in power to feel threatened first, to realize that they don't really hold the power, that they need to share. It needs to be inclusive power. In most African countries, what happens and when somebody wins, it's winner takes all. And then after they've taken all, there's no inclusive government at all. And this is the problem that's happening in Kenya. But also, you need to put it on history. You remember the last elections, and then before that, a couple of years ago, in 2007, I think, there was an enormous amount of problem with in Kenya where thousands of people died after post-elections violence. And that's still haunting, in fact, Kenya. In fact, the actual president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is under suspicions from the ICC. And there have been all talks that he should be going to the ICC to really explain his position. But that has also created more problems because others are seeing him not an inclusive person. He's sort of not all on his own, but he hasn't been really governing the way people want him to see, dealing with terrorism, I mean, the Al-Shabaab issues. And in Kenya is also, as much as the economic growth is there, it's not trickling down. It's growth for a very small group of the elite, and poor people are still suffering.
Now, you did mention some of the key sort of political players in all of this, but who do we need to see sitting around a table together and working together to find the solutions that will put Kenya back on a path of a positive outlook, really?
First, you need to have the government that's now being run by Uhuru Kenyatta. That's the first. You can't do anything without them. And then, of course, the opposition. And then, of course, you've got to get Raila Odinga and all these groups. There's so many fragmented groups to really sit down. But these two are the most important. Civil society is also expressing itself, but civil society doesn't have any mandate per se. That makes it something really constitutional to really come and sit around the table. However, civil society should be included in this conversation.
And of course, the issue of terrorism is really having a devastating effect on tourism in the country, and that impacting on the country's economy. What needs to happen in order to get the situation under control with Al-Shabaab?
I would say there's an enormous amount of things that take place. First, understand what the Al-Shabaab issue is all about, because there's a sense that if you deal brutally with it, what we call brute force, with terrorism, and we know force doesn't work. So there are an enormous amount of social issues that are underpinning. In fact, a great deal of Al-Shabaab militants are living in Kenya. In fact, they've been there for a very long time. So they're a ferment, societal ferment to this kind of thing. So until you deal with that, Al-Shabaab will still be there. But terrorism in Kenya has become now a bread and butter issue, which means, bombs are exploding everywhere. People are being killed. So the trauma is really something the government's got to deal with. But to deal with that, you need to use both the hard portion of it, but also with the soft portion. Be able to talk to people, dialogue with them, but also make sure that the police does its work. Because inside the police and the army, there are suspicions that they're also playing within the Al-Shabaab's hands.
And do you think that it's fair, maybe, that the criticism that's been leveled at the Kenyan government saying that they're failing to take charge of the situation, do you think that criticism is fair?
It's very fair. The Kenyan government is really not doing as much as it should be doing. There's an enormous it's a big challenge, but they got to be shown and be visible enough to be shown to be taking tough decisions. Same as in Nigeria. There's this feeling that both leaders, both Uhuru in Kenya, and then also Goodluck Jonathan, are very weak. They're not really dealing with this terrorism issue. Perception really counts. Although the issue is difficult, if we're looking at the results, what they're doing is not enough.
You deserve to know more.
eNCA.com